Hi everyone, Mrs. Smalls here from Mrs. Smalls Tries It All, the channel where Mrs. Smalls shares a little bit of everything, tries a little bit of everything, and shares with you how it's done. So I wanted to share another one of my teacher's tales. This one is from when I had a kindergarten class. So I taught kindergarten technology from grades K to 5 technology skills. And how my schedule kind of ran, it was kindergarten, and then right behind kindergarten, I had a second grade class. So as one group would leave, the other would kind of come in. That's important. So during this particular kindergarten class, we were preparing for our preschool visit. So this was something where preschool was coming in, and it was like introducing a little activity where they were introducing the pre-Kers to kindergarten life, right? So as the pre-K was coming in, and I had my kindergartners with me, we were doing whatever lesson. Pre-K was coming in, and I happened to see one of the teachers that I used to work with. So interestingly enough, one of the teachers that I used to work with, she has pre-K. Her son was in class with me as the kindergarten aide. Okay. So I go outside, I see her, I'm saying, "Oh my God, hey, Miss Johnson, how are you?" You know, giving hugs, asking how everybody's doing outside of her sons that work with me. You know, I see them, I know how they're doing. And, you know, I'm asking her how she was because keep in mind, I worked with this woman when I first started teaching. So when I first started teaching, the twins, her son, one of them that I was in a class with, they were like 5, maybe 6 years old, right? So they were little kids when I started working. And so now they're in the class with me as an aide, depending on what grade, you know, depending on whose class, what grade it was. I happen to be with one of them today. Say hello to his mom. Then he goes out and he says hello to his mom. Now we come back, and kindergarten is all excited because now they know their activity is getting ready to start. And I was telling them, I was like, "Yeah, guys, that was Mr. Johnson's mom." All right. When I tell you, they stop, they pause like, "Oh my God." One little girl yelled out, she was like, "Mr. Johnson, you have a mom?" And we laughed. We thought that was cute. And I said, "Yeah, we all have moms. Mrs. Smalls has a mom too." Now that stopped the presses because, you know, little kids, they don't care if you're 25, 35, 105. Everybody look like they about to die. Like everybody's old grandmom's age. They don't know. 5 years old, anybody over 17, you're like 100, right? As a matter of fact, when you ask them, "How old do you think I am?" they might say that you're 17 because they don't know. They're little. So not only do they not understand that everybody has a mom. So this guy, this teacher, Mr. Johnson, who's like 26 years old, he has a mother. But then I go on and say, "Yeah, we all have moms. I have a mom too." They stopped. It was like, stop the presses. So now they still talking about moms and how is it on earth that I have a mom and Mr. Johnson, how do we all have moms? How does that work? Because they just can't understand, like, how does this happen? The story doesn't end there. So we go on a little bit more because now we, you know, even though we see the, you know, preschool coming, so this means our activity is getting ready to go on. And so now I'm kind of like closing out the lesson and kind of finishing up so we can get ready to move on to the next activity, right? And so now at this point, I got to switch gears because nobody was going to hear anything that I said. I could have done a magic trick, and at the end of the day, we still got to figure out this mom thing, right? How in the world is this happening? So I explained, like, you know, I asked, I said, "Do you know anyone who had a baby? Anybody who has a baby in their tummy?" And so my mom had a baby, you know, those are the answers. My mommy had a baby in her tummy. I had my little brother, sister, my aunt has a baby in her tummy. She's having I'm having a little cousin, is going to be a girl, blah, blah, blah. So now I have to take like, okay, so now we see the little baby. How many of you seen the baby born? And now the baby's walking and the baby's doing this. And they're like, "Yeah." Now they understand. While I'm explaining this process, with the kindergartners, my second grade is lining up to come in. So now I'm finishing up the little conversation, explaining how we all started in our mommy's tummies, and then we all were your age. We were all the 2-year-old that's running around knocking stuff over. We're your age in first grade and all this stuff. And now we grow up and here we are and we become mommies and so on and so forth. Second grade's waiting in line, right? Second grade's waiting there. They were amazed. Kindergarten, as I'm telling this to kindergarten, they were like, stop the presses. We don't care what you're doing with the computers and the Chromebooks and passwords. You being a mom and you having a mother is out of this world, right? The fact that you even live outside of the school is magical, right? So finished it up. Kids were amazed. They liked the time. They liked learning that little information and they were excited moving on to the next thing. So now second grade comes in. They sit down and usually what I'll do like a nice little, it depends on, usually how my lessons would start. We would sit on the floor, have our little circle time, talk about what the activity would be, and then they would go spread out to the computers, right? And so now I'm sitting down my second grade, having our little time. I'm explaining what the lesson, I'm trying to, but I get a hand. Little girl raises her hand. I call on her. Yes. And she said, Mrs. Smalls, I didn't even start the lesson yet. I'm getting ready. I'm doing a little intro, right? So I didn't really get to what we were doing. But she raised her hand and she says, Mrs. Smalls. And she's serious. How is it that you were a little kid and you became an adult? And then she goes on to say, no, this is what she said. She said, Mrs. Smalls, how is it that you were a kid and you grew up? How do we get jobs? So her thing was, how is it that you start off as a kid, you go through life, and then at some point you become a teacher, a nurse, a this, a that, you work at the store, whatever. How do you get to the point that you are a little kid and you get a job? So I had to explain to her, just like you, I went to school, I grew up, you learn certain skills, and from then on, you kind of choose what you want to do with those skills. And in the case of Mrs. Smalls, I wanted to be a teacher, and so now here I am. But the fact that she was so concerned, I had to really switch gears on the lesson and talk about how we grow up as little kids, and how we all start off as little kids, and then we grow up, and then we learn certain skills, and then we choose certain jobs, whether, and I even told him, like, I worked here at the mall and then I worked here, and I told him about the little process. But yeah, I thought that was the cutest little day, one of the cutest little days I had. And so I wanted to make sure I shared that in one of my teacher tales. So stay tuned. I'll share another story.